Now, I know for me, I think the East region is probably one of the more exciting brackets of the tournament, just because I think you have a huge conglomeration of some of the top prospects in this draft. But when you guys look at this region, what kind of stands out to you? I know we've got at least Cameron Boozer and Darren Peterson in this side, and they even have a chance to match up in that Sweet 16 round, I believe. So, what kind of jumps out to you guys about some of these East matchups?
Yeah, kind of like what you just said. Like, there's probably three top 10 picks, probably pretty much penciled in on most people's board in this region. As long as Michael Brown plays, I think this region probably holds up as one of the better ones. The potential of seeing like a Duke, Kansas down the line, or even Saint. Like, I think there's even like some deeper in the draft talent in this region, like a guy who might be like fringe first to somewhere in the second round, like a Zuby Edgefor for St. John's. Like guys like that really stick out to me in this region. Whatever you want to make of Michigan State and their guys and whether or not they'll leave this year, come back. I just think this one has a lot of good games too. UCLA, UCF, I think is going to be a good game. Not many prospects in that game, but like two teams that are kind of peaking at the right time. So I think this region is pretty deep with them.
Yeah, other than lottery picks, I mean, in our recent video about the sleepers, there was a little bit of a discussion in the comments section about Cohen Carr as a what could he be at some sort of next level. He's going to be playing for Michigan State, and he's had in his career so far with the Spartans already quite a few March Madness highlights. So I'm excited to see if Michigan State starts to go a little bit deeper. What could we see in a matchup like with the Spartans versus Louisville if Michael Brown Jr. is healthy enough and they can get out of that first round and take them on in the round of 32? There's so many teams that have NBA prospects that I feel like if you're an NBA draft fan, this is probably the region that you're hoping has the least amount of upsets because almost all of those top prospects are on the higher seeded, or not necessarily the higher seeded, but the more favored team, I guess you could say. So hopefully all those upsets and all the crazy March Madness stuff happens in other regions so that here in the East we can just see top prospect versus top prospect all the way through.
Yeah, and kind of building off of that, we want top prospect matchups. Me, selfishly, we didn't get it early in the season, but that matchup I talked about earlier with Darren Peterson, Cameron Boozer, I want it badly because we had that game. I think they were playing at Madison Square Garden in November, and of course, Darren was having his cramping issues, which he's actually given more insight on recently. For those of you who haven't seen, but that's a matchup that I want really badly. It's just the issue is Kansas having to run into a Zuby Ejiofor led team potentially. I've seen some people who think Northern Iowa could pull off that upset there, but we'll see if that really happens. But also talking more about Kansas, since we're kind of talking about some of the teams here. Darren Peterson right now, physically, like with the stuff that he's been dealing with, to me, it seems like he looks a lot better, more bursty, more explosive than he did kind of during that mid-season stretch where really ever since the Oklahoma State game, it's just looked like he kind of lost a step. And like I'd argue even since the beginning of the season, he looks more mobile than that at times. But the issue with Kansas is it feels like the team as a whole, they don't have some of that same juice that they had um, and some of those big wins that they pulled off at Allen Fieldhouse. And I think this is just really, this will be an interesting time to see if Darren Peterson can kind of get back to what he looked like more during some of his high school run, even though he still had a pretty great year. But if he can kind of help Kansas get some of that juice back and kind of be that top tier player that we've kind of been wanting to see from him.
Yeah, as a scout personally, I try not to like overvalue like what happens in March. Like it's a good thing to see like what guys do when pressure's on, but I feel like as scouts, you have to be careful about like over evaluating the tournament. However, I think it does like regardless of what scouts think, I think it does do like it goes a long way for certain guys in shaping the narrative. I think Darren is definitely one of those guys who has the opportunity to shift kind of the narrative of what people think about him with a big tournament run. Some other guys in this region that I think could like really do themselves like a lot of good in this tournament run would be Floyd Redungo in Kansas. I think could possibly like sneak into like the latter half of the first if he really like continues to play how he was at a certain point in the season.
Especially if he gets
Um,
that matchup against El Jafor.
yeah, like if he can kind of dominate that matchup, that would do wonders for his draft stock. On the other side of the ball of that potential round of 32 matchup, St. John's, like guys like Dylan Mitchell, I think have an opportunity to really improve their draft stock with big tournament.
Yeah. Also, I don't think we've mentioned that UConn, they're in the number 2 seed here, but they have a couple of prospects as well. But the one who I'm really wanting to see, again, another first rounder, Braylon Mullins, because I think he's a guy who had a lot of he's had a lot of buzz coming into the season, and he missed the first part of it with the ankle injury, but I still think he's kind of jumped back into a lot of those first round discussions. But and again, Cameron, I think what Cameron was saying was important about not overvaluing March Madness, because I think we kind of saw that with Brandon Miller a few years back, and he still ended up being a really talented player. But I think that for a guy like Braylon Mullins, who he's definitely had some great games for sure, but I think for him to have some good shooting performances and just kind of show more of what makes him such a special player, not just for, people who really follow the game closely, but even for some of the more, I guess, casual fans, because UConn, I think, is a great team, but I feel like they also kind of play in a situation, they play in the Big East where not as many people are really locked in onto what they're doing, and kind of, I feel like the Big East doesn't really get the respect that it deserves. So if he kind of has the chance to ball out on a big stage, I think that could be good for him and his overall perception.
I think there's a few other guards in this East region that have a big chance to not necessarily elevate their stock too much, but at least lock themselves in at kind of where they were projected going into March Madness. I'm looking at Michael Brown Jr., who's a guy that's been battling for kind of that top point guard spot alongside Darius Acuff, who right now seems like he has solidified himself as the overall number 1 point guard in this draft class, and also with Kingston Flemings, who we'll get to in a little bit in another region. But Michael Brown Jr., if he's healthy, if he can put together some big performances for Louisville, I think this is an offense at Louisville that when Michael Brown Jr. is available, they're as dangerous as anyone in the entire country. We've seen that when Michael Brown went for 40 points earlier this season. But another guy in this region in the East that I think has a chance with a good March Madness run to really elevate his spot at least into solidifying higher up in the first round is Caden Boozer from Duke. He's played really well at the end portion of the ACC tournament, stepping into the Caleb Foster lead guard role, and it's been an up and down season for him. I know Cam Boozer has been one of the runaway favorites for National Player of the Year, but Caden Boozer has struggled to match the hype of his twin brother. So to be able to end his season with a strong March Madness run, what do you guys think that could do for his draft stock?
I think like you kind of have to really, really go crazy just because he started the year the way he did, and like the entirety of the year, I think still kind of matters a bit more to scouts. So I think he would like have to lose his mind to become a this year guy, especially with all the guard depth in this class. However, I think he could do like a lot for where people slot him in preseason for next year's class. Like I think if he has a really good tournament, he comes like they're able to pencil him in as a starter at the 1 for Duke next year, or at least kind of splitting duties with Rippey depending on what the roster ends up looking like. I think he can probably submit himself as like a lottery guy for next year if he has a good tournament.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I was going to say. Okay, do we want to move on to the West region?
West. Okay.
Okay, yeah. So the West region here, there are some more fun prospects here. We got Darius Acuff, who, if you asked me, gun to my head, I think he's probably the prospect who's going to have like the most explosive March Madness, I feel. I know AJ DeBonce is here, but I think Acuff is kind of the player who is made for, that March Madness type run, assuming Arkansas can, string a few games together. But I think that they really can with this draw that they have. But you also have Arizona here, the number 1 team, who I think is probably going to make the Final Four out of this region. And then you've got a few even the playing game here, I think is good because you've got Dalen Swain, NC State. I think they have a couple of guys who are in kind of draft contention. Overall, I think the West region also has a really strong selection.
Yeah, I think this is a really big like stay or go kind of region. Like I think this can kind of determine a little bit of the depth of the class. Like Dalen Swain, if he has a big tournament, does he continue to skyrocket up boards like he's been doing? Like this could kind of be like a last ditch, probably not, but like a last ditch just for guys like Matt Abel and Paul McNeil from NC State if they can get out of that round. Even guys like at Arizona, like Braden Berries is someone who I have like kind of penciled in like the lottery, but especially with the way NIL works today, if he's like, let's say he gets feedback, he doesn't have a good tournament, he starts getting feedback that he's like the sixth best guard in his class. Is it worth it for him to come back? So I think this class, like, this is like a really big region for like guys who could potentially come back. But there's also some guys that are like at the top. Like there's AJ, there's Acuff, obviously. Another guy, stay or go, Malik Thomas, who's had a big SEC tournament. If he pairs it with a big NCAA tournament, he could also be a guy that we look at to go. Also looking at Villanova, they have Acadian Lewis. That's somebody I like maybe for next year, definitely for the year after that. But he's someone that again could like move up his timeline by a year. If he has a big tournament, he could probably become a penciled in next year guy. So a lot of opportunity in this.
I think the point about it being a stay or go kind of region does make a lot of sense because I think there's a lot of guys who are just kind of on that fringe. Like Malik Thomas is a good pool, but one guy who I'm really looking at to like make a name. I shouldn't say make a name for himself because he's in the first round, but one guy who I think can really cement himself. And if there are people who want to raise people up in March, I think it would have to be one of the Arizona players. And if Braden Burries, I think I'm going to go back to it. I feel like I've said it 100 times on this channel, but with Braden Burries, he was the guy who I said at the beginning of the season, I'm like, if they want to go far this season, I feel like a lot of it is going to rest on him. And like, I think they're a talented team all throughout. They've got Jaden Bradley, somebody else who I would really consider drafting in the second round. Crevis as well is somebody who I think also there's a legitimate argument for him to be a first rounder. Koa Pete, obviously, as well. But Braden Burries, like, I think we saw Jaden Bradley he definitely packed some punch as well in the Big 12 tournament. But Burries, I think he's a guy who can really like be kind of like he can be an X factor. And I think that there have been games where he's kind of shown that. I think the game against, they didn't lose it, or they didn't win it, but the game against Kansas where they were playing at Allen Fieldhouse, that game really jumped out to me because it just seemed like at times Burries was kind of their only source of consistent offense. And he was kind of doing it in a flurry of ways. He was getting downhill. He was getting to pull up jumpers. And I think because Burries struggled so much and like he's not somebody who's going to have 30 or 40 points, like people aren't really looking at him as seriously as like maybe a top 10 pick, but he's a guy who I'm like, he has real two-way value. And like, I think there is enough offensive stuff to maybe do something with him at the next level. So like, depending how this run goes, I would seriously consider raising Burries up based on his performance.
Yeah, there's like a lot of like second round guys too, as I'm looking at it. Like potentially like Braden Smith from Purdue is like he's a really good guard. He's just kind of undersized and older. So him being like a potential second round guy, I have to check Mark Mitchell's eligibility. I don't know if he's out yet, but like that would be an interesting second guy to me. Malik Renew from Miami. Like there's a lot of guys that are like kind of like just in that they can definitely get themselves paid, at least in the second round, or on like two-way deals. So this West region is pretty interesting. Another guy for Arizona that we haven't talked about, Ivan Kurchenkov, I think is how you say his name. He's somebody who's like another one of those guys who like with a big tournament, he could really like start pushing towards like maybe being a second half for the first round guy this year, just because he's kind of what NBA teams look for. Like he kind of just does everything you want out of a role player. So he's someone that's like Arizona just has like kind of like Brandon outlined, like there's a bunch of guys that they have that could go. But another guy that could stay or go, Billy Richmond is another guy who's like kind of teetering. He had a really big game today for Arkansas. He's somebody we spoke about in our last episode. Trayvon Brazil is another guy who could be in like the second round. He had another big game today. So it's like there's just a lot of prospects here.
All right, next up we have the South region, and here I think you've got Florida, Vanderbilt, Iowa, UNC without Caleb Wilson, but I still think that there's some guys who could do stuff for their stock. Illinois with Keaton Wagler. I think this will be interesting. And then Houston as well. What do we think about this region?
This region is really interesting. I think there's there's just a lot of prospects in general in this region. There's a lot of good guards in this bunch. Like I think Tyler Tanner, who I'll kind of penciled in as a next year guy just because there are so many guards in this class, but like he's someone with a big tournament could change that. You have Flemings at Houston. Him versus Wagler would feed families in a Sweet 16 matchup. Like that would be something I would really, really be interested in seeing. Just the contrast in styles, like Keaton being like the kind of speed demon guy, goes 0-60 really fast. And Keaton like just kind of being the slower, play my own pace type of player. I think that would be a really it would be interesting to see how Illinois adjusts to that Houston defense. Caleb Wilson being out is a bummer. I think this region would look a lot different with him there. But I still think Vassar has like a chance to like really move up. I think he's a really versatile big. That's kind of like everything NBA teams are looking for in their bigs. So he's someone I think has a chance to move up. For Nebraska, Peyton, I think has a chance to like. It's weird to me because like normally guys who shoot it like he can, like are high up on people's boards, or at least as like a second round flyer type of guy. But that extra year of eligibility, I think, kind of just pencils him as a next year guy. I would say probably the single prospect that I'm most interested in seeing in this type of setting is Bennett Sturts. He's a guy who's like, he adjusted his game to the Big Ten. He had a really good year in the Big Ten. However, I do want to see how he handles like the athleticism of like the Florida guards, of like having to stay in front of those guys or having to guard those guys and still be able to get off on their defense would be pretty interesting to me. I think the Florida guys are kind of all kind of locked into where you have them. It's like you like them or you don't, especially like guys like Boogie Flan, Xavier Lee. Like those are guys you just have your opinion on. I think Hall is like a guy who is pretty. He's like, I don't know what to do with that guy.
Yeah, he's like a weird. I kind of like him because he does. I feel like he does have translatable skill sets, but he's also a tweener. So it's like, what's gonna happen there? Condon, I think he was really hot going into last year's, and then it felt like after that, like people just kind of lost belief in him. And like, there's still some stuff there, but overall, I think this region. I think what I'm most excited to see is a potential Illinois and Houston matchup, just because you kind of talked about it. There's such a clash in styles, and it's very different. But I also feel like with this region that we have, I feel like we're just bound to get a good prospect matchup in like that second weekend because Florida, I say this and I'm going to jinx them, but I really feel like Florida and Vanderbilt are going to take care of business. I know Florida just lost in the semifinal of their conference tournament, but like they were probably one of the hottest teams coming into March, I feel like. And I feel like a lot of that's just going to translate. And like they still have some of those elements that allowed them to go deep last year. And then Vanderbilt, Tyler Tanner, I think he's a big time player because he's athletic. He does stuff on both sides of the ball, even though he's only 5'11". I feel like we're gonna get some good. There's some good matchups all throughout like these regions, but in terms of second weekend matchups, I feel like this region kind of has the potential to give us the best of those.
So two guys that I'm looking at specifically, there's, like you guys said, plenty of prospects to watch in this region. I definitely like the Bennett Sturts call out. I think going from Drake now to Iowa year over year, it's a different dynamic. He's going to be even more at the top of the scouting report than he was at Drake. And going into a matchup with an 8-9 in his first game, we're going to see him get tested from the jump, because those 8-9 matchups, everyone knows, those are a coin flip. You're pretty evenly matched. And then the next round, if they can make it past that, he's got to go against Florida, one of the best teams in this entire tournament. So if he can come in and really shock the entire country, if Iowa goes and gets past Florida, chances are it's going to be because Bennett Sturts is going for 25 or 30 points and putting on a masterclass in March Madness. But another name that has been kind of stepping his game up, especially at the end of the Big 12 tournament, was Chris Sinak Jr. for Houston. We know Kingston Flemings is that dude in the backcourt for the Houston Cougars, but Sinak's actually been showing a little bit more three-point consistency, and I feel like that's something that a lot of the bigs in this class are not showing. We talked about Henry Vasar for North Carolina being one of the better stretch bigs in this class, but if Chris Sinak Jr. can continue to step out behind the three-point line, hit those catch and shoots in the corners, we already know what he can do inside the arc. But if that changes his whole game, if he can continue this consistency.
Okay, and now we have our next region, the Midwest. We've got, I think we have here, of all the regions, we've got more teams that I feel like just have kind of a flurry of, prospects that could legitimately go. We've got Michigan, who they're one of the best teams in the country, but they've got Yaxel Lindeberg, Morez Johnson, Ade Mara, and then other guys who I think will have stock in the future. Then we've got Texas Tech, Alabama, Tennessee, Iowa State also at the bottom here. Can't forget them. Who else what jumps out to you guys about this region, and what are the matchups that you were excited for? Who are you excited to see more of in this kind of competitive setting?
Yeah, this may be the deepest, of just pure amount of guys. There's a ton of guys here that are either this year or next year guys. Like you said, Michigan's front line always are going to be people to watch. A potential second round with a Georgia would be pretty interesting to me, just because they have a really athletic front line that they give people issues every once in a while. So that would be interesting to see. Definitely, I think the marquee here is that the potential for that Texas Tech Alabama second round matchup is just Christian Anderson with no JT Toppin versus Alabama and their whole host of guards. LeBaron Philon, especially. Yeah, that's a game that I'm really hoping we get. I'm really hoping there's no upsets there. That would really be disappointing. But Alabama has a few more guys that are pretty interesting to me for next year. And they have a guy, Alabama has a few more guys that are pretty interesting as well. Amari Allen probably leading the pack of guys outside of Philon. He's someone who could if he has a big tournament, he could submit himself as a lottery guy, or at least middle to late first round. So if not, he could find himself back on the roster next year. So that, I think he's a swing player to watch. Nate Ament has kind of been on a little bit of a tear as of late. He's someone that I would want to see continue that. It's going to be hard, though, because they have a tough matchup facing the winner of the playing game. And then, in all likelihood, they'll get Virginia, who's a really tough defensive team. That's a matchup I'm interested in watching. Santa Clara, Allen Graves is somebody I am really keying in on. Seeing him against bigger, I would say more athletes, bigger schools, seeing him play outside of conference play, I think is something that is going to be really important to whether or not he sticks in this class or not. Seeing him versus Kentucky is going to be pretty interesting. I think that's going to be a really good matchup. And then a potential second round matchup with Iowa State and Joshua Jefferson and possibly Killian Torrey, who I think is more of a next year guy. I think this side of the bracket has a lot of guys in it.
Yeah, I think Allen Graves is a good shout out. I don't want to disrespect him because I think he's somebody who's kind of had a lot of I feel like even since the beginning of the season, people were kind of rooting for him, and now it's kind of starting to just build up. But I think that this class for me, or this region for me, there's a lot of good matchups here. I think Texas Tech, Alabama, you already said it again, but I think that's the one that I'm really hoping we get, even though Alabama I'm kind of skeptical about. But I do want to talk about Nate Ament because I want to give him his props, because I feel like we haven't really talked about him since he was struggling towards the beginning of the year, and I think he's really started to. I think he has had some up and down like performances, but for the most part, I think he's been pretty good, and I think he's justified himself being a top 10 pick again. Um, and so I think for me, like just with him, I feel kind of bad because I think one of the things that I said was I feel like at the beginning of the year, I felt like this season might look a little bit ugly just because some of the physicality stuff. And I think it did that way. And I think I probably taxed him a little bit more than I should have. But here on this stage again, don't want to read too much into it, but just want to see more of that growth and some of that consistency that he has kind of built on and throughout the year. And I think that these might be tough matchups, but they should be fun games to watch. And I think he'll have opportunities to really show his game. Yeah, Nate Ament, he's the prospect I'm watching the most. I don't know how far Tennessee will go, but I think even him and Jacoby Gillespie, I think they have a chance to put some fun things on our TV screens.
There's another player for Virginia that I think we need to keep an eye on. I don't know how high up in a draft he could go, but their big man on Yunso, who is just a rim protecting machine, just a force inside. That's something that every NBA team is always looking for. Someone that they can get on a rookie deal that can make a difference defensively at the rim. He's been doing it the entire ACC tournament. He's had a huge year for Virginia on the defensive side, and he can score the ball a little bit too. So in that matchup, if we do get a Tennessee versus Virginia, that matchup of Nate Ament kind of headlining their NBA draft prospects versus a Virginia team that I think really has a chance to do some big time damage in this tournament.
Yeah, Yento is somebody who's like he came in with like a pretty high pedigree. I think he started at Kentucky and then he moved around a little bit, but I think he's found himself pretty well at Virginia. He's like one of those guys like you look at and it's like that's clearly an NBA player. Like even if like he doesn't get drafted, like I think that's somebody who's clearly going to play in the NBA one day, whether it's on a two-way and he finds his way onto a roster. He just blocks shots at such a high rate it's just something that I find it hard to believe a team won't find value in one day. So as long as he's able to edge out the rest of his game, I think he's definitely somebody who's going to play in the league one day. All right, so okay, so we've previewed each region. Let's all take a moment. This isn't binding. We're not going to hold each other to this. This is just the night of the reaction show. Let's all give our preemptive, way too early Final Four picks. For me, I'll go first. I have Duke coming out of the East. I have Houston coming out of the South. I have Arizona coming out of the West. And then in the Midwest, for some reason, I don't know why I do this every year with this team. I just can't seem to quit picking them. I just feel like I look at every matchup and I'm like, they could probably like get hot shooting and win. But I have Alabama coming out of the Midwest for some reason. And then I have Arizona Duke in my championship game and Arizona as my early champions looking at the bracket.
I can't lie, Alabama's kind of blowing me.
I don't know why I can't.
The offense is great. It's just that defense. Like,
to be fair, Iowa State is probably where their run ends from what I was looking at. But like,
I low-key think Iowa State will lose early. I can't lie.
That's the thing. Like, I don't know if Iowa State even gets there, and if they do, I just like offense versus defense. I'm inclined to pick offense when the offense is led by the guards in like the tournament. So, Phylon to me gives them like a really big edge over teams when it's like a toss-up. So, for some reason, I'm still doing this. It's like the third year in a row I've done this.
All right, so that's Cam's Final Four. And Cam, I'm right there with you for a bit of it. So out of the East, I've got the 1 seed Duke Blue Devils coming out of that East region, followed by the 2 seed Houston Cougars out of the South. So similar to you on that part, but different in the West, in the Midwest. I've got the 4-seeded Arkansas Razorbacks coming out of the West region. Darius Acuff and company, they are extremely hot right now. Came off an SEC tournament victory. He's playing like the best player in the country right now with his scoring ability. And then I've got Virginia as one of my kind of, not necessarily sleepers. They're the 3 seed in the Midwest, but I was really impressed by what they were able to do at the end of the season in the ACC. They've got a pretty experienced team with some good defense. I think Virginia coming out of the Midwest would make an interesting fourth edition of the Final Four. My national championship, though, is Duke versus Arkansas. Cam Boozer versus Darius Acuff Jr. in a battle of potential top 5 picks. But we know Cam Boozer is a winner at the high school level, and he's also a winner at the college level. Give me the Duke Blue Devils here on Selection Sunday as my first iteration of the bracket as the national champions.
You have a rematch in your championship game, I'm pretty sure. They played each other earlier this season. I like your Arkansas pick. That would make me very happy, to be fair. However, I'm so worried about Arkansas's front line in big games. And I think they can string together a couple, but I think Arizona's a nightmare matchup. If I was Cal, I'd be punching that's our 1 seed. The team with all the bigs. So I actually hope, Jake, I hope yours is right. But I think if Arkansas, I will say this, if they get there, if Acuff gets them to the championship game, there's no way he's losing. No way.
Hey man, if Acuff does that, he might be better than 2011 Kemba Walker. I'm gonna just say that.
It would take something like that, based on that front court. It would take a few rounds of just absolute dominance.
Also, we know the guys that he's getting compared to, so it's not out of the realm of possibility.
Them draft discussions would get so nasty, though.
Oh, it would be bad.
I heard today, somebody was saying, whoever was commentating the SEC championship, I forgot which one it was, but they were talking about how some people were saying he should go number 1 overall. I'm like, what are we doing? He's definitely a top pick, but number 1 is crazy. Anyway.
Yeah, I feel like there's 2 camps with him. There's he should go number 1, or he should go top 3. And then there's the he's a 2nd round pick. Tyler Tanner's 30 spots better than him on my board. It's too I think he's the epitome of spreadsheet FC and that guy can hoop FC. He's really he's the middle ground for the warring faction in the draft community right now. And I think this tournament was only going to pour gas on that fire.
No, that's actually so true. I think it's comical how much, and I'll give a shout out to our guy Logan Eby I think whatever the stuff he's got going on his Twitter, man, the fights I see him getting into, some funny stuff, man. Absolutely.
He's been at war with Arkansas Twitter for a month. Absolute war.
Pure comedy. Anyway, it's time for me to give my picks, man. I'm gonna go through them. I'm gonna just fire through them. I got Duke coming out of the East. I got Houston coming out of the South. For the West, I got Arizona. Midwest, I got Michigan. Now I know what y'all are thinking. Y'all are probably like, Branden, this is such a boring Final Four. I don't care. We saw what happened last year. We saw how it was pretty much all 1 seeds. I don't think the same thing will happen again because I have Houston as a 2 seed in there. But I think that we're kind of in an era where the I don't want to say the Cinderella is dead because I don't fully believe that, and I think that's kind of a lazy take. But
feels like what you're saying.
But what I will say, I think we are in an era where the top teams, they're the ones who are going to last to the end. And in my championship game, I have Duke, Arizona. I think this will be a great matchup for a lot of reasons. But Arizona, I think, is probably the most physical team in the country. Duke, I think they're a skilled team, but I don't think that they can differentiate themselves enough from Arizona to fully get the win, just because I think they're both teams where it's you maybe want them to shoot the ball a little bit more. Not that they can't shoot. And I think Duke, I don't think Duke has the athleticism and physicality that Arizona does, especially down low, which is crazy, I know, saying that since Duke has Cameron Boozer, Malik Brown, Patrick Ngangba, but I think Arizona, I think they're going to give them the belt. So I'm going to rock with them for the championship.
The belt is pretty strong. I will say I have forgot about something, and I would like to make an early amendment to my Final Four. Okay. I would like to change the outcome. I still have my Final Four the same. However, I have Houston making it over Duke, and then I have Houston winning. So we all three have different national champions. I changed my mind for one reason. I forgot that Duke is going through injuries right now. Caleb Foster, Patrick Ngamba, not the healthiest at the moment. We don't know if they're going to play. We don't know what that's looking like. So I think a hurt Duke team struggles against Houston. I think if Houston gets there, I don't think they lose to Arizona twice this season. First game was pretty close. I think they find a way to get it done, and then I think you see draft Twitter also lose their mind again. I think Wagler versus like Acuff becomes like a really like contested hot fight.
I'm just hearing a lot of people that are betting against Cam Boozer, the winner. I don't know, man.
Let me unmute myself. Hey, I think Cameron Boozer is a winner. No question. I think when he gets to the NBA, he is going to be winning championships. I don't know what team that's going to be for. He's going to win a championship, maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe more. And I think making it to the championship game for Cameron Boozer, and like Cameron just talked about some of the injuries they have. I think they will have Gangba back, hopefully by the time the Final Four happens. Because I think he's like probable, but they're just not really sure when he's going to be back. And then Caleb Foster, I think that's a big loss, but I think Caden Boozer, he can kind of step up and take some of that position. So that's why I'm not too worried about the injuries, I guess, myself. We'll see.
I think his win streak stops here, man. He's won in high school. He's won in college. I think this class is just too good. I think the talent is too good to let them just walk through. And I don't pick Duke. It's just something I don't do. The Final Four was already too far for me. I just don't really like anyone in that region to actually beat Duke. Like, if UConn would have looked better in the Big East title game, I probably would have like convinced myself but like I don't pick Duke. So
I don't know how to feel about UConn, man.
Yeah. So we're going Houston. We're going Houston for the win.